Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fusion21 Members Forum. Obviously, we're so glad that you are able at this short notice to join us via this webinar. It's the first time that our two speakers have done it in this format. We tried this on Tuesday. It seemed to work okay, but obviously, if everybody is at home or everybody's somewhere else, well, you're all very welcome, and hopefully you're all nice and safe where you are. In terms of introductions, I'm Andrew Gray, Member Relations Manager at Fusion21, and as I said, a very big welcome to this webinar. Our speakers today on the topic of delivering zero carbon, how can it be achieved, are Ajay Eaton, Divisional Director at Mi-Space, and Graham Evans, Sales Director at Kensa Consulting. As we all know, the climate change emergency has prompted many organisations to place energy efficiency at the top of their agendas, and this session will feature case studies from Mi-Space and Kensa on innovations and solutions that are driving that response. Obviously, Corona is on top of everybody's agenda, and is when we had a brief run through this yesterday, probably the biggest thing that's currently resulting in zero carbon is what's happening as a result of the reductions in all our productivity. But anyway, we won't dwell on the Corona this morning. So we do want to hear from you as the audience, and whilst we can't physically hear from you because we've all put you on mute, and that's just in case you have any kids screaming in the background or dogs barking or whatever, but we do really want you to participate, and you should see on your screen on the panel a questions tab, and if you click on the questions tab, you should be able to write us a question, and we will then see those questions and be able to relay them to the speakers at the end of the presentations. So that's enough from me in terms of my opening comments. What I'm going to do now is pass you over to Ajay. Ajay has worked in social housing since leaving university in the 1990s, having worked on both the client and now contractor side. He has a unique insight in the sector. He's a statutory director of award-winning Mi-Space, and over the past 8 years has led a team to quadruple the turnover of the business and establish a reputation for delivering clients' visions and values. Ajay, over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. Good morning, everybody. This is my first time driving a machine like this, so do bear with me. And it's a bit strange talking to a group of people without having been able to see them or have any interaction. You'll be glad to hear that I'm not here to sell you Mi-Space. What I'm here to do is to share our knowledge in terms of decarbonising of stock. As Andrew said, I've worked in the social housing sector for quite some time now, and the process that we've developed is one that has been over many years. So decarbonisation of existing stock, you'll be able to see the slides all being well. This picture here is a project in Nottingham for Nottingham City Homes, done under the Energy Sprong banner. You'll be able to spot the property that was right to buy in the middle there, that didn't go through the decarbonisation process. So hopefully this will move.
Ajay, I'll move it on if you can't. We seem to have lost Ajay temporarily. His microphone's on mute. I don't know if you can unmute your microphone, Ajay. The teething problems of running a webinar. Ajay,
Okay.
are you back with us?
I'm back. Yeah, I don't quite sure what happened there. Sorry about that. So yeah, so I'm going to talk to you about the case and the need for change, proposal, technology, and the next steps. Hopefully that would take about 20 minutes. Andrew, can you move me on? So, case for change. Everything I'm going to talk to you is been set out in the Climate Change Act of 2008 and in the Clean Growth Strategy 2017. We are in unprecedented times, so these commitments may well change in a post-COVID-19 environment. However, what I would say is that probably more than ever, we will have more and more households in fuel poverty post COVID-19 than we currently have, just due to the fact that people will have a lot less money, employment rates will be a lot lower, so we will have more of a need to do this work than ever before. So by 2050, under the carbon reduction commitment, all domestic homes will need to be nearly zero energy building NZEB, and we'll have a look at that later. And the majority of local councils have now declared a climate emergency, with Welsh Government making a commitment to decarbonise their social housing stock by 2030. We are engaging directly with Welsh Government and their advisors with regards to how they're going to achieve that, and we're working with them on developing that model. Okay, should we move on? So you may feel that the way that we're going to get to NZEB is by building new homes. Well, the reality is that of the 30 million or 29 million homes which will be around in 2050, 24 million of them already exist now. So building new super energy efficient homes is not going to resolve the issue that we've got. So there's 24 million homes or properties in the UK that are going to need to be retrofitted and converted to get to NZEB. Okay, Andrew, move me on. So why is the government doing this? Well, simply because 30% of the energy that is used in the UK is domestic. There's a focus on electrifying heat and hot water provision, and there's a number of reasons for that. Firstly, because by 2050 we'll be fully decarbonised in terms of electric production in the UK, either that be through renewables or through nuclear or hydro. So, but that's only part of the story. One of the key drivers from the government in terms of electrifying heat and hot water is the security of supply. UK is now a net importer of gas, and that comes from various parts of the world that are quite volatile, and the current crisis that we have in terms of COVID-19 will only exacerbate that issue in terms of how that gas is imported. So the government's focus, although it's not really written down anywhere, you won't see it anywhere because it will scare the living daylights out of most people, is that the security of the supply is a real issue. So if we can move everybody onto electric, that will move us away from using gas, which we have to import, which we've got no control over. And also, it is the only way to get to NZEB is by electrification of heat and hot water. So, as I said earlier, in Wales, 250,000 social housing units to be decarbonised to reach an EPC rating of A and a SAT rating of 90 by 2030. Now, I'm not proposing to go into the merits or such like of SAT and EPC in terms of measuring energy efficiency, because I'll no doubt preaching to the converted that we all know they are effectively completely inaccurate ways of measuring energy efficiency in terms of energy usage and their ability to demonstrate zero carbon. So the other thing to say is that before as part of the government's manifesto, they made a commitment to reducing carbon, not as much as the other political parties who went much further, but there's still a very heavy commitment in that manifesto and some significant budgets that are attributed to that. Okay, so do you want to move me on? So this just a little slide just highlights the scale of the issue we have. You can see in there that we've got, in the current stock, we've got 90% of properties with an EPC rating worse than A or a B. So a considerable task on our hands. Andrew, if you'd like to move me on, please. Okay, so what I'm going to talk to you about is hopefully giving you a background to why decarbonisation is an essential part of any asset management strategy. What I'm now going to talk to you about is the current programme that we're delivering for 3 registered providers in the southwest. So that's Exeter City Council, North Devon Homes and Sanctuary. It's a 3-year ERDF joint funded programme. And the program is called ZEBCAT, the Zero Energy Buildings Catalyst Program. So the idea of this program is to stimulate the supply chain, to adopt the principles of energy sprong, which is effectively an off-site methodology in order to limit time on site. So the idea being that the funded program for 16 is to develop a concept. So phase 1, 16 properties, we'll have a look at those in a minute, and phase 2, which we will be starting shortly, is 100 properties plus. Okay, Andrew, if you could move me on. So what is the principle that we developed? The things that are listed down here are not necessarily innovative in terms of they exist. But it's the combination of these measures done together that provides the overall NZEB model. So improved installation of fabric first approach. What we've done is looked at the existing buildings, look at their heat loss, look at their energy performance, and then looked at how do we improve the insulation. So wall insulation, underfloor insulation, not only for the insulation value, but also for the air tightness, increased loft insulation, but also the details between those cold bridging elements are really, really important. So off-site manufacture, we've been working with a partner we'll outline later in terms of the facade solution and how we made that adaptable for the southwest. For those of you who've had the pleasure of visiting the southwest, you know if you venture off of any of the main roads that when we talk about B roads, they're proper B. I think they probably would be classed most places as a D or an E road because they're like farm tracks. So we needed a solution that was adaptable so that we could deliver the solution out into rural areas. And some of the programs that we've done are in quite rural locations. Micro generation, so PV and storage in terms of battery storage, and then low carbon heat and hot water generation through a ground source heat pump, which I won't steal the thunder of the next speaker, but yeah, we used Kenza and their innovative Shoebox technology for the hot water and the heat generation. We have also utilised heat recovery units. So we've gone, instead of going for a centralized MVHR solution, we've gone for individual small heat recovery units that work on the basis of just being through the wall. The reason for that is just through practicalities, we're trying to minimize as much internal work as possible. So all of the work on these properties has been done with residents in situ. So we just wanted to minimize the time on site. As I say, the process, the energy sprung model or the ZCAP model was to achieve a nearly net zero home, i.e. the home uses as much energy as it produces throughout a 12-month cycle. And again, the process was about minimizing the time on site, and then we'll look at how the clients are using the CapEx or the savings they generate and the income to pay off the CapEx. Okay, so if I move you through. So, yeah. So this is just a quick graph that demonstrates the energy usage of a typical house, a typical new build house, and you'll see there that most of the property buildings that we're building these days are still not that energy efficient in terms of why we're still building homes that we're going to have to retrofit in the future. I have no idea, but that's what we're doing. So we're building problems that we're going to have to fix in the future. And then the existing house with an energy sprung, as you'll see there, net zero, so uses energy, but also has a renewable energy generation, and the same for an NZ new build. So you'll see in the NZ new build, the actual energy usage is less because you're able to design the structure to be more energy efficient in the first place. So you have less heat loss. So then therefore you need to generate less renewable energy. Okay, would you like moving on, Andrew? So you'll be glad to hear that it's not all text, that you are going to see some photos and some drawings and some design. So the top photo there is the building for Sanctuary in Torbay. That's what it looked like beforehand. And then what you've got there is the design below that we developed, the proposed elevations, and so what the building was going to look like. So you'll notice that in the photo above, we've got a flat roof on a little single story extension as such out on the side of the building. What we chose to do was to instead of trying to re-insulate that roof and make that flat roof perform better, we decided that it made a lot more sense to actually change the curb appeal of the building and put a monopitch roof on top. That improved the insulation not only of that roof, of that flat roof, but also of the gable of the wall, the two walls there that were exposed as well. So in developing our design solution, what we wanted to do is to improve the curbside appeal of the buildings and mark them out as looking different. You'll notice on the side there we've got an energy pod as well. So what we've, through the principle of what we were trying to achieve here, was to be able to develop an off-site energy pod that could be lifted into position, or certainly install all of the kit in an enclosure outside to aid future maintenance and again limit the impact on the residents. So if you'd like to move me on, Andrew. So this is one of the buildings in mid-construction. On the left-hand side, you'll see those grey attractive boxes. Those are the energy pods. So at the moment, what we've done is utilised an off-the-shelf solution, but for phase 2, we will be manufacturing something that's a little bit more attractive, let us say, and is purpose-built. But because we're only doing 16 units, it was difficult to sort of develop something off the shelf because of quite the low numbers. And we also wanted to make sure that we understood what technology was going to go in there. So for these projects, we have the thermal store, the hot water cylinder, the battery for the PV, the inverter, and the heat pump in these energy enclosures. So each property has its own individual electrical supply. We're not putting in a metered solution So it keeps things simple for the resident, keeps things simple for the landlord as well. Okay, if you'd like to move me on. So just a quick look again. This is a construction photo in the air. You can see a significant amount of PV on the roof. So we've gone for an in-roof PV solution here again, just because it looks a bit more attractive, and also in terms of maintenance, we don't have the issue with the birds getting underneath the PV panels or any of that, and also the windage on the panels as well. But more importantly, we wanted it not to look like an afterthought. So again, very much the principle of what we're advocating with clients that we're discussing is looking at the energy retrofit as being just part of the asset management cycle. So we introduce and look at the low-hanging fruit in the stock. So we look at properties that are due to have roofs replaced, windows replaced, maybe some external work that's required, maybe a boiler replacement, because there's a cost then of doing nothing that can be added into the pot for the energy retrofit, and that makes it just makes it a business as usual activity rather than a standalone program. Okay, if you'd like to move me on. Okay, so these are the extra properties. So all the properties we've done under this program are all fundamentally different. So the blocks we had in Torbay for Sanctuary of our masonettes. The properties here, as you can see, are semi-detached properties. These for Exeter City Council. So the picture above is the picture of what they look like currently. This is a state of these buildings, built around the sort of 1940s, 30s. And then below is was the design, our original design that we came up with in order to maximise the curbside appeal of the properties, and to also, you'll see that we straightened up the hips on these properties. And the reason for that was so that we could maximise the roof area in terms of photovoltaic generation. Our original concept was to utilise a thin film PV on a steel roof. We ended up moving away from that proposal, you'll see in a minute, mainly because of the cost of the roofing solution, as well as the generation wasn't quite big enough. But it's a real shame because it was a really good product and something we're looking to use on our programs over in Wales. So we'd like to move on. So this is again some work in progress. The picture on the left-hand side is the borehole that was being done by Kenz at the front of the property, and again at the rear of the property you can see the energy pods are in place. The off-site panels or facade solution is going on. As you can see in the bottom left-hand corner is the brick effect cladding starting to go on to the onto the off-site metal panels. Andrew, if you could move me on, that'd be great. So this is what they look like when they're finished. These ones aren't quite finished here, but you will see that the property on the right hand side is what it looked like beforehand, and the one on the left is a nearly completed unit. We've just got the last little bits to finish off in terms of the fencing at the front. But you can see that they look dramatically different. You'll have your personal opinion on whether you like the look of the finished grey brick or engineering brick, and the roof with the hip taken out. And as I say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But in terms of developing the solution, the solution anecdotally is delivering massive benefits to the residents. I went and spoke to one of the residents a couple of weeks ago and asked them how they were getting on with the heat pump for their heating, and they said, don't really know. I said, why is it not working? And they said, no, we haven't had it on. I said, we've not needed it on. It's that the house is so warm because of all of the insulation. We haven't needed to put the heat on at all. We haven't had the heating on at all. So anecdotally, we're going to be monitoring these properties for the next year, 2 years, to just see how the energy use compares to what we've designed it to be. But already we're seeing a massive improvement for residents in their living conditions. Okay, Andrew, if you'd like to move me on. So this is the Maui, it's the facade solution. So just a little bit more detail there so you can see how that works. It's an off-site manufactured panel system that in an ideal scenario is delivered to site as a complete facade. We used it in its kit format basically because the locations that we had for the pilots didn't allow we couldn't get a crane or a big delivery vehicle down. So it made sense for us to look at developing the kit format, which makes it a little bit slower than just turning up and craning it on. But the principle of an off-site panelised system that is laser measured and lifted into place is absolutely the principles that Energy Sprong and the ZCAP project are promoting. And to be honest, if we're going to decarbonise 24 million homes or 30 million homes, depending on how you want to look at it, it's not enough labour in terms of wall insulation applicators to be able to undertake that. So an off-site solution is the only way to go. Okay, Andrew, if you can move me on. So what is the Energy Sprong concept? It's not a fit and forget solution. So us as a contractor, a design and build contractor, is not only designing the principle of how this is going to work and delivering it, we are also taking ownership for it as well. So we have to provide a 30-year warranty on the work that we've done, and also it includes operating and maintenance. So the idea being that it allows clients to invest knowing that yes, there's a bigger upfront cost now, but over the life of the building, they know that that's the only cost in terms of those external elements and the heating and hot water provision that need to be provided. We also need to guarantee the energy performance and cost. So it's really important from our design perspective that we get it right, and then also the installation is undertaken absolutely in line with the design that we have delivered or developed, because we've got to, if performance isn't achieved, then we have to pay the resident the difference. Excuse me. What we've also looked at is how do we produce a solution that can be developed locally. We've got a partner, that a housing provider that has a manufacturing arm, and we're talking to them about them effectively developing and taking on the facade manufacture under license. They already make windows, so, and we use their windows on this particular project. And again, what we were looking at for the entire project, just to make it a little bit more difficult, is an assessment of the embodied carbon in the products. Could we use products that were manufactured locally, utilising local people, so we minimise the travel distances, and in essence, that's why we used Kenza, as well as the product being really good. They're manufactured in the southwest, and it's a southwest-based business. So for us, that was really important that we looked at how we go to a carbon neutral production as well. And the other concept of Energy Sprong is about a comfort plan, and we'll come to that in a minute, because it it depends on what your viewpoint is with regards to who pays for the work that's required to properties, and that's an individual choice. Okay, should we move on? So what is the model? Increased capex. So at some point, someone's going to ask me how much one of these units costs, and so I'll save you that question. They're about £80,000 a unit, but I would say, I caveat that by saying that that includes VAT, and the VAT currently on this work is at 20%. And whilst a lot of the work is energy efficiency work, which should be a lower VAT level because it includes things like roof replacement and some defect rectification. The VAT man has advised that it needs to be 20%. So straight away, if you procured this work in a slightly different way, there's a big VAT saving to be made. But it's still a considerable investment, and part of this program is about developing the concept so that we can start to reduce the cost as we go forward. Again, so the model is about a reduced zero operating cost. We covered that earlier with us taking responsibility for the O&M, and also looking at the capital replacements and savings over the life of the building, not just as an upfront capital cost. Again, it looks at the model looks in a different way about how we look at how we do refurbishment work, because you've got to take into account revenue from things like RHI. There is no fit anymore, or not currently. Whether that's going to be introduced or not, we don't know. And export, as well as the energy that gets exported off of the PV that's not used or stored in the battery. There's also the revenue to think about from the comfort charge or the comfort plan it comes back from the resident. And more importantly, it future-proofs the stock, because at some point when the government gets over Brexit, COVID-19, the election, I'm sure there'll be something else, but at some point they will get round to introducing the Decent Homes 2 or whatever that's going to be called, which will force housing providers to achieve a certain standard with regards to energy efficiency. And the other part of the whole we've actually started to look at and get some valuations of the stock when it's been refurbished. And anecdotally, in Nottingham, the valuation of the properties have gone up by £20,000 to £30,000 as a result of the work being done. So again, it's thoughts around the leverage of lending in terms of the asset value. Moving on, Andrew.
Conscious
so
of
that's
time.
very quick. I've got about 2 minutes left. So just a model to show what I was talking about in terms of the traditional CapEx, OpEx and whole life cost versus the alternative model. If you move me on then, Andrew. And again, how the comfort plan works, the plan being instead of energy bills and rent that you pay, or the homeowner pays a combination of the energy plan and rent together. Just move me on. So what are the next steps? So like any R&D project, we've learned an awful lot from this first phase, and the key thing we've learned is what we expected to happen didn't happen. So you'll notice that our original design concept has changed fairly dramatically to what we've ended up doing in terms of the wall finishes and some of the products we're looking to use. But by and large, the concept hasn't changed. So what do we do? What's next to be done? We're developing the design. We're monitoring, the actual performance of that design. Is there a design gap? Is it doing what we expected it to do? The other big part of this is the behaviours of the residents who are using new technology. How do we? It's a whole different way of living in terms of the heating, hot water, the energy production from the PV, how they can utilise that. And then the thing that I'm really excited about is we're developing a platform, an AI platform with a partner, which is effectively machine learning rather than true AI. But what that will do is start to learn the algorithms of the resident, how they live in the home, how they use energy, and how we can utilise the technology within the property to minimise the cost to them of their energy. So, for example, taking cheap energy off the overnight and putting it in the battery so they can use it in the morning. That type of approach, as well as turning lights off when they're not needed. If people go out of the house, it will turn all the lights off and take stuff off as standby. So I think that will really help in terms of tackling fuel poverty that sort of AI platform, I think, is going to be a really, really important part of the next generation of what we're doing in the next the next projects. The integration of technology, got lots of great bits of kit, and they sort of work on their own. And what we need them to do is to work collectively together. So again, the AI platform we're developing will interact with the heat pump, with the heat recovery, thermal store, a battery, etc. And one of the big challenges is about how do we look at the long-term storage of energy. You know, during the summertime, we produce loads and loads of electricity off the roof, and our energy usage is pretty low. And in the winter, when our energy use goes up, we're not able to produce as much. So how do we store energy on a longer term basis? Because the batteries that we're putting in only store it for a short period of time. So again, there's discussions around things like hydrogen, phase changing material, all of those type of things are really important things to think about. And what we're starting to look at, and the off-site, how do we, you know, all the energy enclosures, the cladding, all of those things, we're working hard to look at how we volumize that and make it attractive to a producer or a production environment, so that we can get some real volume through. Okay, Andrew, I think for just the last little bit. So what are the conclusions? Well, we need to start looking at significant programs now. When I was talking to Welsh Government, I was saying, you know, we need to get some significant volume pumping through now. We haven't got time for sort of 2, 3, 4 years to do pilots and programs and tech. We need to get on. We've got 250,000 units. That's 25,000 units a year, and every year we don't do 25,000 units. That's more to do in the later years. So we really need to start making this part of our asset management programs. Volume equals efficiency. We do need some consistent volume to pump through. If we're going to bring the costs down in terms of enclosures, facades, all of those elements, we need some consistent volume so that we're able to go to the supply chain and start having some consistent outputs from them. We talked about VAT. It needs to be 5% or even lower, because again, that makes a massive difference to people who are responsible for paying VAT. We can expect decent homes too, better homes, better Wales, better world, whatever that's going to be. They need to be implemented quickly too, and along with the mechanism of how the work is going to be funded, because ultimately my personal interest in all of this is about fuel poverty. Yes, carbon, we have to reduce carbon. It's a really important part, but it is an absolute travesty in this day and age that we've got people in fuel poverty, and it is increasing at an alarming rate. You know, 12% in England of people in fuel poverty. We know that that's more acute in social housing, and certainly in the southwest, where we've got, say, like 30 or 40% of people off of the gas network, that's even worse. So it's an absolute imperative that we tackle that and get people not having to make a decision around whether they eat or heat their home. And that's me finished. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Ajay. There's been a couple of questions which I'll deal with, and if you can respond very quickly, because I'm conscious of time and needing to get on to our next speaker. But Kamal Hussain from Onward Homes asks about how easy and cost effective it has been to replace, in particular, the Maui panels, and then what does that do in terms of to the lifespan of a building, of the finished building?
Good question. The installation of Maui has been tricky. I think both us and Maui would openly admit that it hasn't gone as smoothly as we'd expected it to. It's taken longer to get on, but we've developed the concept. So I think part of it was because it had never really been done before as a kit. It's only ever been done as a panelized system. Yeah, it has taken longer. It's been more difficult to actually get them on, the panels on, and bolt it all together, because you put it together in a factory and everything works, and you get to the site and it's not quite, that's it, as it is in a factory environment. So yeah, we're about to do some adaptations on site to make it work. In terms of the life of the building, the products, Maui's got a 40-year warranty on it, and the way we see it is that the facade solutions are going to be very much like a, you know, those of you who are old enough to remember those phones where you could snap the covers on and off, and that this will be the same. The Maui system comes with a BBA warranty, and again, if you damage one of the panels, it should be quite straightforward just to take it off and put a new one back on. So, to have answered that question.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, AJ. So moving on now, our next speaker is Graham Evans, Sales Manager at Kensa Consulting. Graham has worked within the renewable heating industry for over 9 years, focusing on residential heat pump systems for both public and private sectors. His experience has led him to Kensa and very much part of that growing and expanding company. I am going to see if I can pass over the screen to Graham. If not Graham, we will continue to do what we did with AJ. But anyway, over to you.
Hi, good morning. Thanks, Andrew. Good morning, everyone. I think I've just taken control of the screen, so hopefully we can get through this these slides with me controlling it. Just a quick overview of Kensa Group. It's built up of 3 companies. Kensa Heat Pumps. This is our 20th anniversary of researching, designing and manufacturing heat pumps in our southwest base, which is just outside of Truro. We've just opened this year in the last month or so, and we've started manufacturing in our new factory based on the same site, but we've increased production from approximately 1,500 units a year to now we can produce up to 30,000 heat pumps a year from our site in Truro. The next company along is Kensa Contracting, who I work for. I'm the sales manager for London and the South East, but will support colleagues across the UK. Kensa Contracting was established in 2013, and it was born out of the realization that the large-scale deployment of ground source heat pumps in existing social housing and private sector could address fuel poverty and deliver the all-important carbon reduction targets. At the time, this need was not being adequately met, understandably, by existing framework contractors for those sectors, as they concentrated on their core business, such as gas and oil boiler installations. Kensa Contracting facilitates these projects by partnering with those existing framework contractors whilst we take care of the design, the specification, project management, householder liaison, which I'll go on to in a little while. Also subcontractor supervision, the equipment supply, commissioning, and support to the all-important access to government subsidies, which can be a minefield and a bit of a headache, but we assist with all of that. The final company within the Kensa Group is Kensa Utilities, which is a infrastructure asset company. Started around about 18 months ago, and they fund and own shared ground loop arrays, the boreholes, and all of the equipment and ancillaries involved in that, that serve Kensa heat pumps and that are delivered by Kensa Contracting. It may be worth taking a note that all of those individual companies, we have dedicated websites for each individual company, so you can go on and have a look at Kensa heat pumps and what we're doing in our design and manufacturing. Kensa Contracting has an incredible amount of case studies in both public and private sectors, which I think will be of interest. And Kensa Utilities really delves down into that asset infrastructure and funding. How it works, the animation works. So even though the schools are off, we are going to have a very brief science lesson on how a heat pump works. I'll try and make it as simplistic as possible. That's the only way I learned. So hopefully you'll be able to understand the basics of a ground source heat pump. It's a non-combustion heating system, and it produces around 3 times more energy than it consumes. What we've done on that diagram and that animation is to split it up into 3. So on the right hand side you have the ground array, which is the borehole and the pipework associated to it. In the middle you have the heat pump, the individual heat pump that goes into each individual property, whether that's a house or a flat. And on the left hand side you have the house itself or flat itself with its heating system going around the property itself. So on the right hand side we have the borehole, and within the borehole we have HDPE pipe inserted in a loop which goes into the borehole, and eventually, and I'll show you how it does, connects itself to the individual heat pump within the home. Inside that heat pump, you can see the internals there. On the right hand side is the first heat exchanger, it's in blue. So we have our fluid, which is glycol, which is pretty much an antifreeze, which runs through the pipework in the borehole, capturing the natural low-grade heat within the earth, typically anything between 10 and 12 degrees centigrade. And what we do with that low-grade heat is pass that into the first heat exchanger on the right-hand side of the heat pump, and that is purely to change the state of the refrigerant, the sealed refrigerant unit within the heat pump. That low-grade heat changes that refrigerant from a liquid to a gas. Even at those low temperatures, it actually works right down to -5 degrees, but typically the temperatures coming into that side of the heat exchanger is around about 10 to 12 degrees centigrade fluid. So on one side of the heat exchanger, we have the fluid coming from the ground. And on the other side of the heat exchanger, we have the refrigerant gas, and we've changed the state of that from a liquid to a gas. That gas is then passed to a compressor at the top of the heat pump, that yellow system that you can see going up and down. That compresses that heat and supercharges that gas temperature from 10 degrees centigrade up to 65 degrees centigrade. That hot gas is then passed to the left-hand side of the heat pump, the red part there, to a secondary heat exchanger. So we're now exchanging that heat from the gas into our heating system and our domestic hot water supply. To continue this, once we've released that energy into the home, we then take the water back through the second heat exchanger, and that is then passed through a expansion valve, which then changes the state of that fluid back to a colder state, which then goes back into the borehole and the associated pipework. So that's the basics of how a ground source heat pump works. We utilize the low grade temperature heat within the ground and then concentrate that heat individually in each home to provide heating and hot water. Andrew, are you able to, there we go. So I just whipped over a slide there, apologies. So this is a slide on a traditional district heating system. You have your combined heat and power plant or power plant on the left, and that is serving individual properties. So you'll see residential buildings there, commercial and light commercial buildings. The drawbacks to this, there's potential of quite a lot of heat loss through the network. The pipework runs that feed all of those buildings need an incredible amount of insulation, and they're running at very high temperatures. Those high temperatures could affect and could cause overheating in risers and corridors, certainly in residential situations. You're also looking at having to supply networked heat metering and split billing for all of those properties shown there. There's highly specialized servicing requirement for that CHP power plant, and typically a backup system will be required if there is a major failure. What we're trying to do, or what we do, and what we've successfully done is mimic that system in a local and renewable way. So a shared ground loop array is a form of low temperature heat networks connecting to our heat pumps inside individual dwellings. So it's a different approach. We can link as few as 2 properties, but it's infinitely scalable for larger developments, so for housing estates, blocks of flats, and even whole villages, which we're working on at the moment. And if you go on to Kensa Contracting, you'll see more detail of that down in the southwest. It's suitable for single and multiple occupancy dwellings, that is houses and apartments. It's a communal ground rate pipework, and it mimics a traditional gas framework. So that diagram you see on the right-hand side shows our boreholes, which typically connect to a manifold, which will then feed each individual property and its own individual heat pump to supply the heating and hot water. So the benefits of a shared ground loop array, where we connect up multiple boreholes and share them across multiple properties. It's an ambient temperature distribution. Remember that temperature coming from the ground is typically 10 to 12 degrees centigrade. So there is no chance of any district heat losses or overheating in the riser pipework that will feed multiple properties. There's potential for free summer cooling as well. That depends on the type of emitter used within each property. For example, fan coils can offer cooling. It's powered from the occupant's own electricity supply, so that enables them to switch energy suppliers. So even in blocks of flats where you have multiple units, each individual flat can then go out and choose the best possible energy supplier for them and obtain the best rates. Has incredibly low running costs. The unit actually runs on a 13 amp plug. It allows for independent billing and independent heat usage. So each property has its own independent control of that heating and domestic hot water usage. Now, this is an important part, which should be of interest to you, is once you connect more than one property to a borehole and a shared ground loop array, it is then eligible for non-domestic renewable heat incentive, which means 20 years of payback. Split ownership is permitted. The next part is also an important point, the ground array. That borehole, the pipework, and the pipework leading from the trench and into the individual properties has a lifetime of 100+ years. So this should be regarded as an asset to the owners of these properties and the boreholes. Typically, the installation and the borehole drilling is planning exempt. We do come across some areas where there may be permitted development requirements if you're close to non-stock properties, but we can help with all of that planning process, and we also help with the renewable heat incentive application as well. We have a team based in our Truro office, a compliance team that will assist with both of those elements. And if anybody has attempted to look at the RHI documents and what's required, you'll understand that it's important that a manufacturer and the people that are installing it and commissioning the system are involved in that process. So Ajay very kindly mentioned the Shoebox Unit, which is being utilised on those projects for Energy Sprong. This is it. This has been specifically designed for multiple unit installations. It was designed actually to fit in a 600 by 600 kitchen cupboard. And on that very first slide I showed you with the heat pump and how it works, this is the outside of the unit. So all of those components, the pump, the heat exchangers of the compressor are all installed inside that individual shoebox system. It comes in 2 sizes, 3 kilowatt and 6 kilowatt. Obviously, those sizes are designated when a full design and heat heat loss calculation is done on the property. It's very quiet in operation, 47 and 52 dBA respectively. Once they are inside a cupboard, it'll be difficult to hear the unit running, and actually the energy efficiency and the efficiencies that usually are taking place by the owner mean that the unit is not running 24/7 at all. It's only running at certain times when heating and hot water requirements are called for. As I say, it has an integrated ground side circulation pump, so the unit will pump the low temperature liquid coming from the ground itself. The heating and hot water, we can supply up to 60 to 65 degrees centigrade. It fits in a cupboard or under a sink, as I just explained, and it's compatible with all control systems. The typical controls that come with the Shoebox unit are Honeywell controls and a very basic thermostat. The system has been designed not only to utilize as much as possible the free energy within the ground, but also to be easily controlled and used by the owner of the property or the tenants. So try and keep it as simplistic as possible for usage. I think Ajay mentioned that the adoption of this type of new technology needs to be looked at. We've looked at it and we understand that the controls and the simplicity of usage is key for deployment of this type of technology. So the borehole installation itself, with the shared ground loop array, we'll go vertical. Typically, we will go from around about 150 meters. I'll have to just change that side, 150 to 200 meters deep, each borehole. It does require specialist installation. We work with a number of specialist borehole contractors across the UK that have daily expertise on drilling boreholes. It's space efficient and quick. The first borehole would typically take around about a week. We do a lot of desktop and geology surveys before we start drilling. But the first borehole will typically take around about a week as we take our time and ensure that the geology surveys are correct. Additional boreholes after that could take anything between 3 and 4 days. I'd like to quickly just talk you through a project that was completed in October 2018. The heating side of that project was completed by ourselves in 2018. This is for Enfield Council. The principal contractor on that project was Engie. It is still England's largest shared loop district ground source heat pump installation. Over 8 tower blocks supplying up to 402 individual flats. There is an expectation, and that has been realised, as a 50% savings on residents' heating bills. There's significant CO2 emissions and reductions across those 8 blocks. The council have benefited from the 20 years of non-domestic RHI, which is a very important point when looking at large-scale projects like this. And because of the poor SAP rating on the individual flats, Enfield Council also benefited from eco funding. The total contract value of 7.3 million wasn't for the heating, it was for the full project. As you can see, there's scaffolding up around those blocks. External wall insulation and double glazing was also fitted to the blocks. Ajay made a very interesting point, and it's certainly true in this case. With those external measures, those additional measures of insulation, the actual heat pumps, the majority of time, are actually working to supply the domestic hot water production via a cylinder. The heating requirement has dropped incredibly low on these flats due to not only the heat pump, but also the external wall insulation and double glazing. The typical electricity cost and charges for the tenants within those blocks was roughly £1,000 a year. They were using electric underfloor heating and an electric hot water supply. That has now reduced down to typically £350 to £400 a year for those residents. But I must say that isn't just down to the heat pump. That is a major part of it, but also to the EWI and double glazing that was fitted to the blocks.
Great. Just to interrupt very briefly, we've got a further presentation from NG at our members forum in the South on Tuesday, so that those members of the audience are interested in specifically understanding about that scheme. We'll be able to show them. But anyway, you continue.
No problem, no problem. Well, that's good, because you'll also get to understand NG's side of that project as well. This is a really important part of the process. Sometimes the concentration can be on the technology, but actually this is a really important part, tenant liaison, and I'm working with Croydon Council on a number of projects, and tenant liaison is really key to start the process of switching over from perhaps electric heating or gas heating to this renewable heating solution. The residents remained in occupation throughout the works, and resident liaison officers both from NG and the council, and also Kenza can supply resident liaison officers if we are the main contractor, to consult with each family or individual tenant before, during and after the works. Now, I say before, I'm just about to start a project with Croydon Council. We're not actually on site for another 2 months to start the borehole drilling, but I've already attended 2 resident liaison meetings just to talk through in terms of what to expect and what the heating system will do and the benefits to them. Individual plans are agreed for each individual property to ensure the safe delivery of works. Access to respite areas was supplied for the residents, and the ability to view mock-ups of a typical flat installation, which I'll show you on the next slide. So they could come down and actually physically see what they're going to be receiving over the next few weeks and months. And it gives them an opportunity to ask technical and general questions on the usage. Another important part of all of our projects is survey and design. We take detailed property surveys to establish the exact heat loads that are required for that property, and that also gives us a chance to size the heat pump correctly and the radiators as well, because we will be either replacing radiators or fitting new radiators. Radiator sizing is important if you're replacing a gas system, which would typically have 65, 70 plus degree temperatures going through them. We like to run that a lot lower, typically at 45, 50 degrees centigrade. So there may be a slight increase of radiator size. Now that may go from a single panel to a twin panel radiator, but the efficiencies speak for themselves. Borehole design is a combination of initial desktop analysis and on-site thermal response tests. We'll also carry out topographical surveys, so we check to see what is underneath the ground before we start drilling. Certainly in London and the southeast, that can be anything from underground stations to cabling, which is typical across the UK in fairness. Risers are designed to ensure there is no requirement for central circulation pumps. So there is not a plant room requirement for additional pumps to pump all of this energy around the block. Each individual heat pump has its own individual pump, so there is no requirement for that additional plant room and additional systems to maintain. And surveys are carried out, as I said before, to locate all buried services, both externally and internally. Those buried services internally can be electric cables, pipework, gas networks, etc. That diagram on the right is a typical design that we will draw up for our contractors to use when installing our systems. On the right hand side, you'll see that picture there. That is the mock-up we've done for the Enfield residents, so they could come down to a dedicated room at the bottom of a block and actually have a look at that. That is still open, and we are welcome to take visitors there to have a look. Obviously at the moment, with the times that we're living in, that may be delayed until the end of the summer that we can redo those visits, but you're more than welcome to come down and have a look at the blocks and have a look at that mock-up. And it showed them what we'd done. So we were removing existing hot water cylinders. We were showing them how the new radiators and the distribution of the pipe work. We showed them how the heat pump is installed into the airing cupboards. As you'll see, there's a shelf fitted and the hot water tank is installed above the heat pump. We show them the new controls and the thermostats and the thermostatic controls on the radiators, so they can take control of their heating system in the individual rooms. We also talk about how we flush through the ground array and fill it with antifreeze, and showing them how the system works. The heat pump is then switched on. We then took out the existing underfloor heating system and decommissioned it. Making good and pipework painted is actually done during the installation process. And then we individually hand over the system to the resident until they're comfortable with how to use the system and to use it to their best advantage. So in conclusion, the technology is well developed and has been deployed at scale, and you'll see more of that on kensacontracting.com, where, as I say, you can get a lot of case studies on all of our projects. There is government funding for shared ground loop heat pumps, i.e. RHI, which is in place and stimulates significant growth. Very quickly, non-domestic RHI is up for review. It is due to finish in March 2021. However, we are in constant contact with BEIS and we are pushing for either extensions or an understanding of how non-domestic RHI 2 will look after that period. Government funding and support is absolutely key to enable us to get to net zero and get to the carbon reduction that the government are asking local authorities to adhere to. Investment returns on shared ground loop arrays are attractive, both in return rates and the potential volumes. We have the knowledge and expertise to deploy this technology. And ground source heat pumps are a sustainable solution for both new build and retrofit projects. For all of those within local authorities, it does offer a solution to the climate emergency we are facing today. It is no exaggeration that I would say on a fortnightly or monthly basis, we're contacted by local authorities, social housing providers, on their climate reduction plans and climate emergencies that they're announcing. And we offer an initial free feasibility on potential properties, tower blocks or houses, where we'll do a desktop feasibility report for you free of charge and give you the key outcomes, which is your carbon reduction, the cost of installing this type of equipment, and the potential RHI return that you could expect over the 20-year period. Andrew, I think that's me done. Hopefully I've caught up some time for you.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. We've had a couple of questions. One from Susan Roberts at Wales and West Housing, which is about do radiators need to be oversized? And I mean, I think some of that flows back to temperature and the need to do this alongside potentially other works in terms of insulation, which Ajay referred to before. But specifically, it's about then radiators and their size and so on.
Yeah, we try and minimize, thanks for the question, we try and minimize the oversizing of radiators as much as possible. We understand that sometimes space is limited within properties. What we would normally do, instead of a single panel radiator, we'll use a twin panel radiator. So width and height wise, they will stay the same, potentially the same size as a single panel radiator, but they'll be slightly deeper. The reason for that is we need to release that energy out into the property. The radiators are sized for each room. We try and minimize it as much as possible, but remember we have a lower temperature flow rate going through that radiator, which is far more efficient and a really efficient way of running any heating system. So the benefits outweigh the fact that some radiators may have to go from a single to a twin panel.
Okay, we've got one more question. If you just bear with me a sec, again from Onward Homes. What's the average cost to install of say a 2-bed house, if that's a if that's a sort of pot of good again?
Yeah, looking at a retrofit property, obviously the economies of scale will come into this. So the more properties that are utilizing this, you will see a slight decrease in average cost. I'll give you an example. We're working with Croydon Council on 2-bedroom properties at the moment, 2-bedroom flats, but that could be a house. The individual cost would range anything, depending on how many, but anything from £14,500 to £16,000, but that includes everything. So that includes the cost of the borehole, the pipe work, the risers, the heating system, the radiators, the heat pump itself, the cylinder, the full installation and commissioning. Now, when you compare that to typical framework installations, say gas or oil boilers, you will see an increase in there, but they do not benefit from renewable heat incentive. So that initial cost is then taken up over 20 years with RHI. We'd expect to see an 80 to 85% return on that cost through RHI. When you counter in projects such as Enfield, where they could benefit from eco funding, actually that project started to level out. Croydon Council, I'm working on a block of flats with 44 flats. They're actually seeing a positive return. They're actually breaking even with RHI on the actual cost of the heating installation of those 44 flats. And with the eco they can claim, they're actually going into a positive outcome on that expenditure. But each individual project, we will look at each individual project and give you those expected returns as a free initial feasibility report.
Mm-hmm. Just to add to that, from the ZEBCAT project, the installation cost was around about 15,500, and the RHI that's going to come back is about 17,000 over the 20 years. So, what I would say is that in no other, when do you ever put a boiler in that pays you money? Never. And you'll in that lifetime, over 20 years, you'll have probably at least 1, maybe 2 replacement cycles to consider in there as well. So the RHI is also importantly a guaranteed amount. It's not because it's what they call deemed, so it doesn't fluctuate on the performance. So it's a guaranteed payment. It's every quarter it gets paid. Every 3 months?
Every 3 months. And that's an important point AJ just pointed out there, Andrew. I'll be very quick. The life cycle of a ground source heat pump, and certainly the Shoebox, is 25 years. So you do not have that interim replacement cost that you would with another heat source.
And just a sort of final question, and to some extent it's to both of you. I mean, I assume that you have had a sort of increase in inquiries over the last 12 months as a result of, in particular local authorities, but also housing associations declaring climate emergencies and looking to address this issue.
AJ, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think I've been beating the low carbon drum for probably 20 years, I think. And all of a sudden we've basically reshaped our business over probably the last 4 or 5 years to be pretty much dedicated to this sort of low carbon retrofit work. So we are inundated with people talking to us, asking us to do pilot programs, We've got a route to market in terms of frameworks such as the Fusion21 framework that is a really good framework to use in terms of finding a partner you want to work with and develop your concept. So yeah, we're at a point now that we've got lots and lots of people doing pilot programs, but what we really need is some longer scale programs, you know, sort of the programs that are going to last 5 years, 10 years, because then we can work with partners like Kenz and go back to them and say, look, we want to purchase, or we want to work with you over the next 10 years to deliver these programs in these locations, so that they can invest in an even bigger factory, or in upskilling their supply chain in terms of borehole installers, in terms of fitters, and so on and so on. But that's what we're doing at the moment. We're working with clients predominantly in the Southwest and South Wales, because that's where we work. We're a regional contractor. But what we're trying to do as well is share as much of our learning and knowledge, because, you know, to be honest with you, there's so much work to do. We won't be doing all of it, and we'll be doing a very small part of it, but it's important that we share that learning across contractors, clients, and so on, so we're all pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, I would mirror that. It's Graham here. I'd mirror exactly everything AJ has just said there. Also, Kensa was born out of utilising free energy and reducing fuel poverty and reducing carbon 20 years ago. We are contacted, each individual person, salesperson or specialist in ground source heat pumps in Kensa, we're contacted on a weekly basis by local authorities to help tackle the climate emergency that they've just declared. And the key thing for us is, yep, we can do this, and other measures, as AJ has spoken about, it can be done, but also the pressure has to be put on government to support this. And if they want local authorities to comply and reduce carbon, and to offer their tenants and residents an efficient heating system that is easy to use, and they will see the benefits of it, then they really do need to support in funding on getting this over the line. We've gone from a production of 1,500 units to 30 to 35,000 units. That isn't touching it at the moment. We know we need to build more, and we know we need to work on more projects. So yeah, there's a lot of elements that are key to this successfully happening. AJ's mentioned it, I've mentioned it, and you know, we're all working hard and together to try and realise that.
One final question, and again, big thank you to our audience for sticking with us. I know we've dramatically run over time, but we have had another question from Kamal, which is around the sort of how often do the units have to be maintained? I mean, we all know that with service of the gas boilers and so on. Is it the same process in terms of the unit?
No, the actual Kensa ground source heat pump, the shoebox that I mentioned, only has two moving parts in it, a compressor and a pump, which do not need yearly maintenance program. What we do recommend is that there is a natural service or maintenance regime put in for the radiator system and to check the domestic hot water cylinder, but the heat pump itself does not require any maintenance. The heat pump itself, if there is an issue, will tell you. There's a control on the front which has different codes on it, but we keep it as simple as possible. The compressor is a sub-Saharan compressor, which has is more than happy to work in the temperatures and the conditions we have in the UK and across Europe. And the pump itself, it's not running 24/7, so there is no requirement for annual servicing on that.
Okay, that's great. So a big thank you to both AJ and Graham. As was sort of alluded to, we Fusion21 have been working hard to also address this issue. We've got 2 new frameworks in place that address this issue. So our new energy efficiency framework, which went live earlier last month in February, 68 suppliers appointed, 7 lots, again a national framework covering the sorts of works that we've discussed today. So external wall insulation systems, cavity wall, cladding systems, domestic PV and battery storage, non-domestic solar PV, electric vehicle charging point, and LED lighting. We also, as with all of our frameworks, they have direct awards options, or a negotiated direct award, or to run a further competition from the frameworks. We set out there how to put those rates together. But we also then have a heating and renewables framework, which again, pleased to say that the speakers are also on in terms of them. Again, we have installation of ground and air source heat pumps. So again, if anybody is interested in having a discussion about these projects, then we would be delighted to have that. So finally, we are running 2 more webinars next week on Tuesday if you're interested. One similar topic to this, but as said, with speakers from NG and Mi-Space again, and we're also running a session on the future of procurement. Details of those webinars are available on our website. Hopefully you found today relatively easy. I know we've had a couple of people who weren't able to hear us properly, but we'll try and resolve those issues. We are planning to run some more of these online webinars, particularly as the whole world appears to be working from home and face-to-face contact isn't possible anymore. And we're also very much in these difficult times planning to keep in touch with our members and suppliers, and we are happy to share good practice and practical pieces of advice in terms of what's going on. So we'll be sending out some communications on that, and hopefully we will run our members forums again face to face in the autumn. So that's it from us. Again, a big thank you to Ajay and Graham, and a big thank you to you, our audience, for listening this morning. And we hope you all keep well, and we hope to see you all, or at least hear from you all again. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.